right. So thank you, everyone. This call is currently being recorded. I already shared that on the Discord channel. So if you're not comfortable with having your video recorded, please feel free to turn it off. Right. I would make sure I cut off this part that has all our videos on before we upload it. Yeah, so thank you all so much for joining this call. This is like our very first community call. At some point, I was a little bit nervous, like, oh, what if no one shows up? Because this is like our very first time. And I am really happy that we have a couple of persons that joined. And we hope that we continue doing this kind of calls. As a community, I feel like it's very essential for us to meet from time to time to just talk about what's going on in the community, both as a project and as an open source project and um, as it concerns the DID community in general, right? So that being said, I also want this call to be as interactive as possible, right? Everybody is free to make an input, ask questions when it's time for Q&A. If there is something that any of us is talking about that you feel you need to have more light thrown on, feel free to like stop us on the way, maybe use the chat box and ask away. So, okay, I haven't introduced myself. So I am Amarachi Johnson Oba, and I am the community manager at Veramo. I'm a new face, kind of, to a lot of people. I base in Cameroon with my husband, and I joined Veramo as a community manager 2 months ago. And this call is like one of the ways I feel like we should come together as a community, and I'm super happy that we are pulling it off actually at the end of the day. So first, I'm going to go ahead and share our agenda, what we have to discuss for the call today, after which I would introduce the members of the Veramo team for those of us who may or may not know who they are. And then I would open the floor for the team members to talk about some of the things we have on our agenda, including like an overview of what the Veramo project is all about. We'll share our milestones, the things that our roadmaps, the things that we intend to add as features later in the future. And we are also going to talk about the release that we have coming up. And then we would open the floor for questions. I think that is okay, right? So first of all, I would quickly introduce the members of the Veramo team. Marcia Nestor is here, and he is a senior protocol engineer. We also have, I'm actually calling from the participants I have here. So we also have Italo, who is also a senior protocol engineer at Veramo. We have Nick. Nick is a software engineer. I don't know if I'm getting this correctly, but I think software engineer is yeah, that's what
I
Nick
don't,
is.
I don't know my actual title. Software engineer is fine.
All right, thank God I'm not like the only one who is confused about that. So we also have Simon. Simon is also one of our protocol engineers. Then we have Sonal Patel, who is our head of operations at Consensus Mesh. And we are all happy that we have everyone on this call. So without further ado, I'm going to give the floor to Messia to talk a bit about Veramo and what our mission and vision for building this project so far has been. So, Messia, you can have the floor.
Hey, folks. I'm gonna try to share a screen because it's maybe easier to follow along with some visual aid. Maybe can anyone see my screen?
Yep.
Yes.
All right. Maybe no. So I'm just gonna share it like this. I'm not gonna go into slideshow mode. All right. So Veramo is like a lot of people ask what it is. It's a lot of things at once, but we think of it as a framework for decentralized identifiers and verifiable data, and we try to design it to be multi-platform, extensible, so that we can add a bunch of stuff to it. And not only us. it's something that came out of the Uport project. I don't know how many people are familiar with the old self-sovereign identity base and in Ethereum. The Uport project was something that started out as I think as a social recovery mechanism for the Ethereum identity, but then gradually transitioned into a lot of things. And one of those things was this like broader SSI vision of user-owned data. And along the line, we started adopting these standards that were popping up, like the decentralized identifiers, verifiable credentials, and we had built a stack made of three sets of libraries: one for mobile, one for web, and one for backends and Node.js. And anytime something had to change, we had to change it in three places. It was pretty hard. Standards were shifting a lot, and we decided we needed a common base for all of these that's going to be flexible enough to adjust to these shifting standards. It had to be multi-platform so that the core of it at least worked on all three platforms, and it could be then it should be extensible so that we could add either platform specific stuff or protocol specific stuff depending on the use case. And we needed this to be a basis for our further experimentation. In the meantime, the Upor project ran out of fuel. So we are now like fully focused on the Veramo framework itself. And our goals going forward are to see a community coming together around this project and using this modularity and extensibility to build multiple other protocols, either contributing it back to core Veramo or to just highlighting it and having other folks use it without without our explicit permission per se. Okay, so I'm not sure if everyone is aware of how the typical data flow works in Veramo. So as I said in the beginning, it's a library, essentially. It's a library that combines multiple other libraries as plugins into something that presents a common API to an application. This library, we call it internally an agent, but we might rename this to something that's not so, I don't know, targeted at a specific audience. And this agent instantiates these plugins that I mentioned earlier. And these plugins provide various methods to the agent or to the app that's using it. And these methods can also call each other with calling context, and they can emit events, which can also be subscribed to by other plugins and by the app itself. And we also have this message handler abstraction, let's say, that can be called either by the client app or by external APIs. And this introduces other events into the mix. All right, so if there are any questions, please feel free to stop me and I'll try to answer. Cool. So as I said, we designed it to be very modular. So this modularity is takes the form of plugins, and we built a bunch of plugins for what we consider to be the core minimum to have a library for decentralized identity and verifiable data, which is like a message handler, credential exchange stuff, credential issuance, of course, DID management, key management, and some storage logic as well. And the way these are constructed, the way these are used depends on the use case, essentially. So someone using this framework can opt to use some of the plugins or others depending on what they need. For example, someone might need just a did resolver, and they might just use that plugin and build their own did resolution functionality into their app. And other folks might need the full functionality, and that's okay too. And we also have this abstraction of remote plugins brought by the remote client and remote server packages, which allows us to have sort of distributed agents. So you can have an agent implementing some stuff, some functionality, and that functionality can be then forwarded to another agent and used as if it were embedded into that application. So in this example, I have a standard agent, and it's using a REST API to connect to some backend that manages keys. And that backend is another agent that only has the KMS plugin, for example. KMS meaning key management system. And of course, it can also be like fully remote. Like someone can have just a shim that exposes the methods locally as a library, but the actual implementation can be in a backend somewhere. Some people request this functionality as well. All right. Any questions so far? All right. Cool.
Yeah.
So then I'm gonna talk a bit about our coming roadmap. But before that, so when I was writing this slide, I was thinking that we will have our V4 release already out there, but it's been delayed a little bit. So after I don't know, sometime this week or next week, we'll have the release out, which will bring some much requested stuff like JSON-LD, credential support, and new verification API, and a lot of other things. But after that, we have a bunch of things planned, which cover some various topics like credential status, storage, new did methods. We have a CLI application that's also embedded in the repository, and a bunch of new protocols that we want to add, messaging support, and yeah. So this is the stuff that we currently know we want to be focusing on in the near future. I'm not putting any timestamp on this because there's like shifting things that always delay our plans. So I don't want to commit to a particular timeline, and instead I'm just presenting them in terms of like priorities for us at the moment. Of course, like everyone from the community should be able to influence these priorities just by voicing some requirements. And after this near future, we have sort of like a longer backlog, which is not even not even organized in terms of priorities, but stuff that we know we kind of want to add to Veramo itself, like new key types, like core framework improvements, like this remote agent calling has a very simple permissioning model right now. We want to extend this to be more granular, have maybe some like data ownership in the API itself, and linked to this permissioning system as well, so that one can fully make use of decentralized networks to build these agents. And of course, upgrades over upgrades and fixes and features and all of that. And of course, like add your own requirements to our backlog, because that's the point of having a community and not being an isolated project. All right.
All right. Yeah. Thank you, Marcia. I think you just walked us through Veramo and our roadmap. If you have any question for Mercia or for the Veramo team in general, you can feel free to use the chat, or if you want to speak, you can just request for your mic to be unmuted, and I would actually grant you the access to unmute your mic. Um, I think we should quickly run through the next release. I don't think you've already talked about that, Marcia. Before we move over to the questions, do you want to quickly talk about that before we start taking questions? And these slides are actually available for anyone who is interested to go through these slides. I know those diagrams were quite a lot. I don't think everybody would get the whole context right now. So I'm going to drop it on the Discord after the call, including the recording of this video. So you can always watch it all over again. You can always check out the slides later on. All right.
Right.
Marcia.
So maybe I can talk a little bit about our release process. So the way we want to release ideally is not like once every few months like we're doing now. It's much more often. And the reason this latest release has been delayed so much was that we introduced this Credential LD support without fully testing it on all these platforms that we mentioned earlier. And we very much want our core packages to work on all of these platforms. And sadly, React Native and React were failing it in various ways because of the Christmas tree of dependencies is what you called it, Niels. Yeah, it took a lot to just get things off the ground and then to start adding support for just a few signature suits, and of course we'll be adding more later on. But we just wanted to get this in Veramo in the first place. I think with this addition, it's to my knowledge the only kind of SDK or framework that knows how to deal with both JWT and JSON LD credentials at the same time. I don't know, I'm maybe not aware of others out there enough, but as far as I remember, each SDK that I saw only dealt with one format. So yeah, our back to our release process. So after this is this is going in the V4 release. Going forward, we want to release much more often, even on a daily basis, if that's the case. So the idea is that we're using semantic release, and we if a fix comes in, it's just going to be a patch release. If a feature comes in, it's a minor, and if we introduce a breaking change, we'll give those a bit more consideration and do that on a not so often schedule, but that's going to be just a major bump. And this big release right now is introducing some breaking changes, and that's essentially why it's being delayed so much as well. I try to condense the major things that are introduced in this release. It's not covering everything yet, but it should be there soon. Right. So yeah, this project is not a static project. The reason we want to have these community calls and the community in general is that folks contribute to the project itself, and the project helps through these contributions, both from us and from other community members. It helps everyone, like rising tide lifts all ship kind of situation. So now I'll open the floor back to questions.
Yeah, thank you very much, Marcia. And of course, thank you to everyone who had contributed to the Veramo project so far. Niels, I see a lot of your activities on the project, and thank you very much for those contributions. They mean a lot. So if there are any questions, please feel free to use the chat or request a mic. And while we wait for those, I think we can go ahead and answer some of the questions we got from the form that we shared. We got two questions there. And the first was, which DID methods are you planning to support? I don't know, Italo or Nikki, any of you want to take that?
I think I can answer. So it's not a it's not an exclusion zone about the ID methods. So ideally, we would support all of them because it's hard for folks to pick and choose. But we can only dedicate so much time to these things. So we will probably be introducing the more common DID methods out there, or DID methods that are used by projects which we want to interact with. Like I mentioned, Ceramic and Kepler earlier, so we might be adding, direct support for DID3, DID-PK Edge, and of course the support we have so far for DID-P, for example, is just minimal. We could extend it to other key types, for example, and we have this very sweet contribution from Niels with the DID ion, and yeah, a lot of other stuff like that, stuff from Czech, stuff from our Orange protocol, or I don't know. It's also up to you guys, the community, to kind of vote on these things based on based on your requirements.
And
Okay.
we need to remember that it's not only our team building that, right, Mersha? So
yeah.
Like check it, by instance, we have Ross here, their team implemented the DID check. So we expect everybody to build their own DID methods. Yeah.
All right. Amazing. Yeah. Niels, you can unmute. Yeah.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. For the people that don't know me, I'm Niels. I'm CTO of Spherion, and Spherion is also in the space of self-sovereign identity technology, specifically in the educational area, clinical trials areas, as well as in the government areas. And we are very much working also with Veramo technology. So that's also one of the reasons why, well, we are hopefully giving something back because we heavily believe in the open source nature of the project, of course. That does bring me, I guess, to a bit of a question. Are you also looking for something like having sort of a process around new features that you want to be introducing? Because at Spherion, we are, for instance, heavily involved with what is called the presentation exchange, which is sort of a definition by the Decentralized Identity Foundation in which verifiers can request credentials basically from a holder. But there's also, for instance, the credential manifest, which is sort of the opposite, where issuers or holders actually can request credentials from an issuer, which then also can use the presentation exchange in there. And we're also very much working on what is called the DID, let me rephrase, the JOD VC presentation profile, which is sort of a combination of all kinds of different specifications. And it's really an intro profile, which combines, for instance, DID web, DID ion, credential manifest, presentation exchange, self-issued OpenID Connect, OpenID Connect for verifiable presentations. So quite a bunch of specifications. And we're heavily working because we have low-level libraries that can do most of that work, basically. And ideally, from our perspective, stuff like that would be added to Veramo, also into basically your upstream project, instead of us having to have sort of like a fork or have separate plugins. But I'm wondering, okay, what would be the approach there?
So, excellent question. Our main requirement for the core set of packages is that it works in all of these scenarios that I mentioned earlier, all of these platforms. We might drop some of these requirements along the way if we see that it's not something that's desirable, or we might split the main repository into multiple others so that they're more platform specific. But ideally, we will want folks that use a particular protocol to be able to use it both on web and mobile and backend at the same time, so that they don't need to search for the like months of solutions that we search through to get there. So if this is already true, then just make a PR, and that's that's the way to go. Other than this, we sort of think of Veramo as something like, because we started this project with the community in mind from the start. We were thinking that maybe along the line we might move the project itself into DIF, or even partner with DIF, so that teams from that foundation that are working on these standards have this like common practical ground for experimentation, instead of just the standard papers, and have something tangible when the standard is finished, have some default implementation that they can all point to and say, yeah, this is the reference one. And ideally, all of these things that you mentioned would be done as Veramo packages or plugins, or even if they are like independent libraries, they done in such a way so that we can adopt them easily within Veramo. And of course, Veramo itself is not a static thing. The API decisions that we made and the design decisions, none of this is static. If something needs to change to accommodate these protocols, we can definitely add it or change it or discuss it. We're actually looking forward to this kind of discussion.
Yeah, it makes sense, because I think, yeah, you mentioned the presentation exchange in the slides. And yeah, I already mentioned that it's part of, indeed, the presentation exchange itself, of course, but also part of Credential manifest, and also being used in the OpenID Connect context. And it could even be used, for instance, as part of a DITCOM in the present proof protocol, basically, because the new version basically has quite a lot of similarities with what the presentation exchange is about. So let's discuss that, I guess. And maybe the last thing that I would like to mention is that we're also working quite hard on creating an open source wallet, which will be available later this year. Sorry for plugging some security technology, I guess, fully based upon the Veramo framework and some other plugins that we've created. So that means that there will be a React Native wallet available later this year, which has all kinds of Veramo technology in it.
Wonderful. I was actually going to raise this to the community. We want to build a list of compatible projects out there. So maybe it doesn't matter if they use Veramo or not, but just to be able to point, like if someone wants to use SSI technology, and they can pick one of these wallets and just use it with Veramo. All right. So thank you for plugging that. Everyone else, feel free to plug your own thing as well.
Yeah, all right. Thanks, Nils. That was a fantastic question you raised, and thank you, Marcia, for tackling that. Before we move over to Ross, I'd love to read the second question we have from our like people that submitted questions earlier. The question is kind of two in one, and I think the first part has already been answered by Marcia when you did the whole about Veramo. He's asking, how do you see Veramo will evolve in the future? And I feel like this has already been tackled, but then unless you maybe still want to throw more light. And then the second part of the question says, are you planning to release some are you planning, can you all still hear me? I feel like my network is
Yes.
yeah,
Yeah, we can
okay,
hear you.
I just got the sign that my internet is unstable. Okay, so are you planning to release some new development tools or demo projects built using Veramo?
Yeah, we actually have a
Anyone wanna
bunch of
take
them in progress. Maybe Nick and Simon or Italo can answer some of these.
Yeah, we have a few demo projects in progress. One thing we've noticed is that we have an idea for a project, we start working on it, and then we realize that there's some large feature that needs to be added to Veramo in order to support the demo project. So just as an example, I'm working on a like a browser agent, which should have, in theory, all the functionality of a you know, a remote agent, including DIDCOM support. Right now in the base DIDCOM support in Veramo is HTTPS transport only. So working on a peer-to-peer transport implementation for DIDCOM, which would let you use it just inside the browser. And that's a demo that we want to show off and make it easier for people to get started using Veramo, get started developing with it as quickly as possible. But just during that process, we realized that there's some core changes need to be made. So it gets delayed a little bit by that type of thing, but it also, even just the ideas for what we want to demo lead us to developing new features for Veramo that are used beyond the demos.
All right, awesome. Simon, do you want to? I know you're also building something that should like depend on
Yeah, sure.
Veramo as well.
Sure. So one of the things that I'm working on right now is like the Discord bot that we are hoping to use in our community server that would let basically issue credentials peer-to-peer from community members to community members. You know, we don't really know the exact list of the features that it's going to have, but I guess we hope that together with the community members, we will kind of figure out what this bot should do. But basically, you should be able at least to issue a kudos credential to to someone in the community for doing a great job, and that way they would start accruing a reputation, which is verifiable, and then we can think about other use cases of how do you use those credentials that have been issued to you and stuff like that. So that's coming as well.
All right, awesome. I also think when it comes to the area of demoing projects that were built using Veramo, we have the showcase channel for that, and we usually encourage everyone to like share. Feel free to share what they are building on the showcase channel, and it's also something I intend to eventually build a strategy upon on how to properly get the projects that are using Veramo to display or share what they are building with the community, so everyone kind of sees the different angles and different areas that people are actually using Veramo. I feel that would be very helpful. Okay, so Ross, the floor is yours. You can ask your question or make your comment.
Hey, yeah, this was just because I saw I'm just going through your like upcoming release. And so it's kind of two questions. So one, JSON LD signature support. So will that just be as simple as the JWT previous kind of plugin? Like we'll just be able to add that straight into ours and we don't need to actually do anything else?
Yeah, that's the goal, is that you just add a plugin and then you just pick a new signature support, a new signature type or a new proof type. And
Wow.
Ideally, that's the way the project should be used. Just add a plugin and use the functionality.
That's just like knocked off a whole thing off our backlog. So that's great. And when is this release kind of planned for? Do you have a rough like estimate?
Yeah, I'm hoping sometime this week, but more likely early next week.
Okay, cool.
But you can already use it in like if you install the app next packages, then you can use it.
Perfect. Okay, cool. That's amazing. And then in terms of there's the credential status plugin. Is that status list 2021? Are we talking about revocation status in this?
Yeah, so we want to be adding some the full spectrum of credential verification. So that includes credential status and credential schema. So we modified the verification API right now to include status checks, but we don't actually have a lot of implementations for status plugins. So at the moment, if there's a credential that has a requirement to check its status with one of these status methods, it's probably going to fail because we don't have an implementation for it. But Italo is working on status list 2021 implementation in Veramo, so that it can be used to both manage this revocation as a backend, and also to check for the latest status of a credential.
Okay, cool. Yeah, Tyler, we can connect on that, because we're exploring how we can use the resource module that we've kind of talked about as a way of kind of using the kind of storing the status list 2021. So the same thing that we've used for like the credential definitions and schemas and so forth. So yeah, we good to chat about that at some point, but sounds great. Thanks. That's it. And the Discord bot sounds super cool. Did you say a kudos credential, Simonas?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Nice. Yeah, it'd be great to chat as well. Thanks.
So I think this is basically an experiment in both reputation management in a community and what Niels raised, which is like a DIDs for Discord users. It's also going to be an experiment in DID ownership transfer. So starting out with simple UX with custodial DIDs and then transferring, maybe, I don't know, if all of this works out well, we might be coming up with some flows to do this for our best projects.
Yeah, awesome. And I think when the experiment is done, we could have like kudos credentials for joining community calls like this, right? That'd be cool. Okay. Okay, you just answered the question Nels had on the chat. Okay, so I don't think, is there any other question before we kind of round off? This call is supposed to last for 45 minutes. So we have like 5 more minutes left. So if there is any other question, maybe one more question before we wrap up. Okay, I guess the questions are, that's like all that we have. Okay, so at this point, I guess I'll just have to thank everyone once again for joining. We have a Twitter Spaces with the Czech team next week on the 14th. We are basically going to be talking about the recent implementation Czechs did with Veramo. So it will be cool to join the call and, you know, get to know how Czech is working with Veramo, what it means for their community. And as I said earlier, this community call, I really intend for it to happen often, like maybe monthly. I think monthly is great, and where we can just come together and talk about how the community and the project and every other thing you feel like bringing up about the community and about the project as well. So I don't think I'm missing anything. I just feel like we are almost like we are done, right? Okay, so thank you all so much once again for joining this call. I'll share the recording of this video and the link to the slides on our Discord community so everyone can catch up on them. And the comments we have on the chat, is that something you want to talk about on this call? Okay, it's like a resource. Okay, thanks for sharing that. All right, so thank you all so much once again for joining the call, and have an amazing day for those still in their mornings, and then for people like me who are almost rounding off their day, I guess we'll call it a day. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Have fun.